will. Let's call the Judiciary to order. It is now 6:30.
Horizon says 6:33.
Thank you. Sounds good. I
Good.
think that should be like, don't you?
That would be nice.
I have a hard time with a little hand.
Okay, the reason I called this meeting to order for the Judiciary Committee is a reference to the charter of government and signing it out. As you guys know, historically, we have brought charter government here before. 2 years ago, in 2010, at that point in time, I was a Judiciary Chair at that time and had asked Mark Butterworth to educate the community, and I had also spoke and sent a letter to the Neighborhood Association Leadership Council and asked them if they could take it on to educate the community on what charter government was all about and how charter government could work for the city of Canton and what people wanted out of charter government that was presenting it. At that time, it dropped, and there was a gentleman, I believe, who said they were going to the community and was going to get signatures to put it on the ballot. At that point in time, we heard no more of charter government, which means nobody at all forwarded the issue on in terms of educating the community or went out to get signatures to put it on the ballot. Even at that time, I took a random poll here at City Council and asked the neighborhood associations who was here that night, all who understood what charter government was. And if anybody understood it, please stand. At that point in time, Monique Connor was the only person that stood, and then she misunderstood the question. So no one stood in favor and understanding what charter government was, which gave you an idea, and these are people that came to council on a regular basis. They didn't understand what charter government was, and they come here regularly. So then how would we believe that the rest of the community understood what charter government was and putting it on the ballot so quickly? And thus, that's why this time around, when it came to the committee, I said I was going to take my time in signing this out and seeing what kind of a plan that they would have, or each of us would have, and why we're bringing this forward, so that we could also present that to the community at large. And if there's a plan around educating the community, etc. And I think you guys read my comments in the newspaper, and why I feel that charter government isn't. We're not ready for charter government. That we are not. In my mind, we are not diverse enough in our thinking to have every ward represented. So with that being said, I wanted to ask the sponsors, and I know Mary said that she could not be here today, and Mary sponsored the communication to bring this down and asked every council person who would like to be involved. I know that Edmund had indicated that he would sign on, and then Edmund took the lead. So today, Edmund, I know you have a presentation to present to council, and maybe you can tell us what was your thinking around not sponsoring it, but supporting the communication that came down for charter government, and what is there a plan to educate the community and etc. So with that saying, if Member Hott.
Yeah. One person's making the decision for the entire council whether this thing comes out or not, and that's you. You should sign that and get it out for a vote. We're
Okay,
representing, no, wait a minute, I didn't interrupt you. Please don't interrupt me.
I'm the chair, so I can interrupt. That's my role.
Your rule, thank you.
Yes.
I'm glad we all abide by that.
Yes. Thank you. And we abide by your committee as well, so thank you.
But
Everybody has that in chairmanship.
now, it should come out for a vote of council. Holding this thing and not signing it out is just basically un-American. We're here to represent the people and to vote the way they direct us to. It should come before council. It should come out for a vote. And we don't know what charter government is going to look like until the charter is drawn.
Correct.
And that takes 15 people to draw that charter.
Correct.
Those 15 people are elected at large from the entire community.
Correct.
Short of changing state law, there's nothing else we can do about it. But if we can't make it any different. State law dictates how we form charter government. It does. It says 15 people
Okay.
elected at large to do that.
But the
So-
question on the floor, Member Huck, with all due respect, is to the sponsors and asking them the reason why the charter was brought forward. And I think that's what we are going to determine tonight, whether or not this goes forward and I sign it out or not. So I think you're jumping the gun a little bit. And it is the prerogative of every chair to be able to thoroughly research the legislation before them. We've had several ordinances that came through Judiciary Committee that we could not enforce, that I ended up having to work to try to get it fixed. So I'm saying tonight that in all pieces that come through the Judiciary, as long as I'm chair, I'm going to thoroughly research it so we don't have that problem again. So Member Matt, could you please give us some kind of a picture of why you felt that it needed to come down at this point in time, and maybe you have Mary's sentiments as well.
Well, I can't speak for Mary.
Yeah, nobody could.
Okay, can everyone see that okay? Charter government, I firmly believe, from a legal and policy perspective, is frankly a no-brainer for the city of Canton. And just with this brief PowerPoint, I will try to articulate why I feel that way, why I sponsor the communication, and why I think the time is now to sign this out of committee, have a vote on council floor, and ultimately put this before the voters of the city of Canton. So what is a charter? Is, I think, probably the first place to start when discussing this issue. And it's essentially a constitution for a city. It's the basic framework that a municipality must follow in its operation, governing the citizens that it's elected its leaders. One point I think that it's very important to make is that a charter, a good charter, does not attempt to identify and cure every administrative issue that a city may have. Just like our federal constitution doesn't try to identify and cure every issue that may affect the citizens of the United States, so does a good functioning city charter. And it leaves a great deal of policymaking power to council and gives them flexibility in meeting the needs of the municipality as they may arise. Now, those aren't Edmund Mack's words, those are the words of the Ohio Municipal League, which is probably the foremost, definitely the foremost authority on municipal legal issues. And so, what is that then contrasted with what the city of Canton has? I'm sure everyone in this room knows by now that the city of Canton is actually a statutory city. Our legal framework is defined by the city of Columbus, or by the Ohio General Assembly, rather, in the city of Columbus. And if we want to make changes to the framework that governs what we do, we have to hope that Columbus changes them for us. And that's not necessarily an easy thing to do, because when the Ohio General Assembly makes a change, not only do they have to be willing to apply that change to Canton, but to every municipality that has a charter. And so when you want to change the framework that governs the city of Canton, it's actually a very, very daunting task to try to go that route and to have the General Assembly actually amend the statutes. And again, in the words of the Ohio Municipal League, the statutory plans are inflexible. They cannot be adjusted for the size of the city or tailored due to a city's particular economic needs, social climate, or political needs. You're really stuck with what the General Assembly is giving you. So when we look at what do other cities do, 73% of all cities in the state of Ohio have already done this. Have already done what we here are discussing during our committee meeting. 7 out of the 10 largest cities in the state of Ohio have already done this. And why is that? It's because a charter government fundamentally gives the citizens more local autonomy and more flexibility to deal with the unique needs of a particular community. So what are the advantages? They are certainly flexibility and local control. In the words of the Ohio Municipal League, the charters may be drafted to strengthen the democratic process and give more efficient government than is available under the statutory form. You don't need the General Assembly to approve what you're doing. The voters make those approval on their own. But instead of talking, generalities, specifically, how can a charter be better? Specifically, what are some of the improvements that a charter, a properly drawn charter, can enact on behalf of the citizens of Canton? And I think that's the threshold issue that Chairman Weston is driving at. The changes are literally limited only by your imagination. You can, for instance, have a dramatic change, replace our mayor with an unelected city manager that's appointed by council. That's an available change under the charter form of government. You can go the other direction. You can consolidate power in the position of the mayor. One example is to eliminate the need for us as a body to approve who the mayor puts on commissions, who serves on the different boards in the city of Canton, and essentially turn over the reins of the city of Canton to the mayor's office. You can even do more structural changes in the city of Canton. One that we often hear a lot about is combining the auditor's office with the treasurer's office. Those are all available under a charter form of government. All fundamentally changes the way Canton would look, but all something that we can undertake. But what's important to me, and why I think that this is, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, a no-brainer, is the subtle, efficient changes that can be done with a charter that you can't do with the statutory form of government to make Canton better. And one of those changes, which is certainly one that I care a lot about, is actually strengthening the democratic process. Councils of non-charter municipalities presently do not have the power to submit ordinances to a vote on their own initiative, except for tax levies, bond issues, or other statutorily authorized mechanisms. Under a charter, such a procedure can be authorized. And so if we want to have the public weigh in on traffic laws, if we want to have the public weigh in on an animal control officer, a charter can allow that to happen. Now, there's certain specific statutory mechanisms where that can happen now, such as reducing the size of council or expanding the terms from 2 years to 4 years. But unless it's specifically statutorily authorized, that cannot be done. That's one efficient, simple, and effective change that brings the city of Canton, the voters of the city of Canton, into the democratic process. And I think it's a great change. There's other certain changes that you can make that aren't nearly as drastic as the change that I displayed a few moments ago. You can liberalize or restrict tax and debt limitations. You want to authorize the city to have the ability to incur more debt, or the other way around, less debt, that's something that you can do with the charter. You can actually streamline council meetings. Anyone who's been here before, and I'm sure almost all of you have, here are all the archaic things that we have to go through, suspending this, suspending that. That entire process can be streamlined, so we focus less on the archaic, rigorous rules, and more on actually governing, hearing the constituents' issues as we're engaging in our city council meeting. So when we talk about the type of changes as to why I supported this legislation, why I do, and why I think it's a great idea, these are the type of changes that would make the city better, and that would ultimately make the public leaders more responsive and reflective of the people that elected us. So then what's holding us back? This is such a great idea. What's the roadblock? Why aren't we going through this process? It lies, as far as I can tell, and what I've read, in the actual composition of the Charter Commission. In order to engage in this process, we have to elect, as citizens of Canton, a 15-member charter commission who would be charged with the duties of drafting a charter. This is not anything that we can change. This is ingrained in the Ohio Constitution. Every other 73% of the cities in the state of Ohio have done this. And if we want to make this good government available to the city of Canton, we have to do the same thing. The members would serve without pay, and ultimately, and I think what's a very, very important point, their end product would have to be approved by the electors of the city of Canton. The Charter Commission doesn't have the right, it's not bestowed upon them to dictate what our form of charter government would be. The voters of the city of Canton ultimately make that decision. So what else is holding us back? Well, what happens if some of those changes that I talked about before, the mayor's office is now ordained to the city of council, to the Canton City Council, and we decide who the mayor is? Or if something like the auditor's and treasurer's office is combined and all of our friends lose their jobs. That's not something that's very likely to happen. And I think that if we look at what happened in 1962, the last time a charter was drafted and put before the citizens of Canton, it failed. And it failed by 71% to 39%. And why is that? 29%. Sorry about that. It's because it made sweeping changes to Canton City government. All of the council members were no longer ward council members. They were all at large. And it reduced the size of Canton City Council. On the surface, that may seem pretty unimportant. Well, I mean, council members are still there. But one thing that 1962 election confirmed was that the voters of the city of Canton care about their ward representation. I think it's safe to say the city voters now, if the Charter Commission were adopted, would not approve a charter that made wholesale changes to city government, because the city of Canton knows what they want and they like how they're represented now. But that's not to say we can't make the process better, we can't make the process streamlined, and we can't make the process more responsive to the citizens' needs. So what else is holding us back? There's fears that we've read about that a charter commission would draft a charter that treats people unequally. Certain classes of people are going to be treated different than other classes, whether it's socioeconomic, whether it's racial, or whether it's geographical. This charter commission is going to skew our city government to favor one class of citizens over another. And I think there's absolutely no evidence whatsoever to support that view. And I think the threshold issue that you have to get your minds around when actually considering that possibility, how could that even be accomplished? How could a charter government legally engraft a discriminatory intent into Canton's law? What would that even look like? Are the citizens who live in Frank's neighborhood no longer allowed to vote? Or are all public funds going to have to be directed to John's neighborhood? And I think when you really think about the issue and you think critically about it, I think it's the fears aren't realistic. And I think a good example is the city of Columbus. The city of Columbus, if you look at the demographics of the city of Columbus, it's 68% white and 32% of the city are of minority. But when you actually look at the composition of the city of Columbus, which is a charter government, the majority members of the city of council of the city of Columbus are in fact of a minority. And I think the notion that a charter is going to lead to unequal treatment, if it's not supported by any evidence that I've ever seen, it's disproven by what has actually happened in reality. We've heard about a fear with the charter government of North versus South. People, purportedly, who live in the North or more economically suited, as opposed to people who live in the southern part of the city. again, it's difficult to conceive how a charter could somehow favor the northern part of the city to the detriment of the southern part of the city. But I think more to the point, we trust the entirety of the city to elect our council persons at large. Why would we not trust the entirety of the city to elect our charter commission? We hear a lot about education, and to be quite frank, I think it's a delay tactic. I think that when you look at the actual facts, charter government has been debated in the city of Canton for years. Most recently in 2010 and 2011. There have been 4 public meetings discussing this issue. And there have been over 25 articles in the public record discussing charter government, explaining charter government, laying out the possible changes, laying out the possible drawbacks, and laying out the process. If a voter wants to be informed, the information is certainly there. And to be frank, if you feel, any member of this council, that your specific constituency is not informed on this issue, get out there and do your job and inform them. Because the tools are there, the information is there, and the only thing that's holding us back on this issue is ourselves. I started my remarks by indicating this is in fact a no-brainer, and I believe it is. The expert on Ohio municipal law, Attorney John Govt, remarked, statutory plan cities would be better off if they adopted a charter, even if they don't change any part of their governmental structure. So if you make no changes in the city of Canton to our current statutory form, embed that in a charter, we are still much farther ahead than what we currently have. The cities that have not adopted a charter are missing out on the ability to have local autonomy. Now again, these aren't my words. These are the words of the foremost expert in this area. As I've indicated previously, it's highly unlikely that the voters are going to approve some kind of radical charter. Second, there's no evidence whatsoever that any charter that's formed by a commission and ultimately approved by the city of Canton is going to somehow have a discriminatory effect. The fact of the matter is we've been debating this for years. The time is now. Let the voters decide this issue. Certainly be happy to answer any questions that
Yeah.
you may have.
One quick question, if you will. Is there something specific that you want to see out of charter government here? Because these were like hypotheticals of what we could do. But when you sent this forward, is there something specific that you would like to see Canton City adopt in their charter government?
In order to make changes, you have to put the mechanism in place. The first step to making Canton more responsive to the voters is first giving the citizens tools. That tool is a charter. So in terms of specific changes, I think that any change, certainly a dramatic change like what I talked about earlier, we have to have studies, we have to have potentially consultants, if you're looking at a cost-saving measure like combining the auditors or the treasurer's office. But we don't even get that far. This issue isn't contingent upon specific changes. This issue is about giving the citizens the tool to make changes possible. And that's exactly what we're doing if we vote to approve charter government on the ballot and form a commission. Now there's changes certainly I'd like to see, Edmund Mack sitting here would like to see. I would like to see the ability of us as a council to submit ordinances for approval by the municipality.
The voters.
The voters. That's putting the cart before the horse. The first thing you have to do is give the people the tools and then allow the process to take its place.
You used the framework of a nuisance ordinance or the traffic cameras. If we wanted to bring that before the voters, you're saying we could not put that on the ballot as under statutory city?
I mean, these aren't my words. This is in the opinion of the Ohio Municipal League. So the view of the Ohio Municipal League is this: unless it's a bond issue, tax issue, or if it's something that's specifically authorized by statute,
Right.
changing the council terms, we don't have the mechanism to do that.
Any other questions? Anybody else want to jump in and chime in?
No. I'm kind of hung up on the whole educating of the public thing. I've been here for 1 year and 7 months. Half the time I feel like I'm clueless. I don't know what in the hell's going on around me. Half the time I feel like some of my colleagues are clueless and don't know what the hell's going on around them either. I'm constantly explaining to my constituents how government, the city works. I think Edmund's on to something here, because honestly, man, to try to educate our constituents on how a charter government, we spend every day educating them on how our government does or does not work. Why we can't get this done, why this is a delay, why that's a delay. And I do. I've spent the last 1 year and 7 months trying to learn how government works, and I have spent 1 year and 7 months educating my constituents on how it works. No, on our current form of government. You call code, they refer you to another department. You got a problem with zoning, they refer you to another department. We're not getting anywhere with what we got. Now, it's worked for 200 years. Our population's decreased, our economic structure's decreased. We're part of the Great Rust Belt now. We need to change. We need a tool that gives us the ability to adapt our government to the needs of our community, and to use the defense that we need to educate the public. Hell, man, they don't know what we're doing now, and half the time we don't quite get it.
Member Fisher or John, and then Hyde.
I'm going to take kind of a middle view on this, which is, as Edmund and I have discussed on a number of occasions, under the current way a charter is formed, which you are correct, we have no control over that, I do not favor that policy. I've expressed this to members of the legislature, that I think that there's more than enough reason that they can take existing municipalities that already have ward lines drawn, and you can elect a charter using the same format as you elect the council. And there's no reason that they couldn't. The legislators that I spoke to said, oh, that's true, you can do, that there's no reason that you couldn't, but of course, that's as far as it goes. As much as some of those things sound rather large, I think there's also a misconception about charters, that they give you a lot more authority than what you already have. You're bound by state law, under statutory form of government. If you have a charter, now you're under home rule. Folks, if the law director's here, and I've heard him go over this a number of different occasions, he tell you is that statutory home rule cities have the same legislative authority as a charter home rule city. And we'll go back to the chairman's traffic cameras, because this is something that's very pertinent in the news right now. The state of Ohio has no particular code or statute at the state level determining whether or not you can have red light cameras or speed cameras. So if you're a charter city, you have the home rule authority to put traffic cameras in, as you do as a statutory city. The state of Ohio is now looking at a statute banning traffic cameras and speed cameras. If that comes to fruition, then the exact same thing happens in the inverse, which is that whether or not you're a home rule statutory city or a home rule charter city, neither one of you have the legislative authority, because our home rule authority, charter or statutory, is based essentially, or not essentially, it's based in totality on state code. If the state says we have the authority, we do. If there's ambiguity in the state code, meaning that they don't say one way or the other, as a general rule, you have home rule over these. So what you have, at least in my opinion of it, is not to use an analogy, a charter form of government is not a new house. It's rearranging the furniture in the house that you have. We still have the same legislative authority. We still have the same financial issues. that we would before, but we can rearrange the way we do city council, we can rearrange the way we do the administrative branch, you know, as you said, Member Mack. You have the ability to replace elected officials with appointed officials, so, and none of that's good or bad in and of itself. But it doesn't, you know, obviously, I think this idea that this gets us out from underneath the state, it does not. That's my feeling on charters, but I will say to the chairman, just as a member of the committee, if I could, I do believe, however, that we should sign this out to the council, and that council members should be able to vote it up or down, and that you know, we'll send it to the elected representatives of the city, and if the council as a whole decides to put it on the ballot, and the city elects a commission, which again, I've long had concerns with how that commission would be formed, but if they do and they enact the charter, and that charter is accepted, then we'll live by the you know, their decision. I don't think that we should you know, simply decide that we're not going to vote on it once we have legislation done. That's, you know, my opinion on it. The rules, as they stand now, certainly give you the authority to do that, Mr. Chairman, and I respect that. But as my opinion would be, I think we should bring it out for a vote, and I've made my feelings known on the legislation in and of itself, but I do believe that we should vote on it as a council.
Let me just, for the record, let me straight. Have I said to anybody that I'm not sending it out?
Absolutely
Yes.
not.
Can I say that to anybody that I am not taking it out?
Absolutely not. And I'm just weighing in that.
Did I ever tell you personally, did I ever say I was not taking it out?
You said, quote, unquote, I am not going to sign this out until the community is educated.
Correct.
Therefore, what are you as an individual going
Correct.
to do to ensure that 70,000 people are educated?
I think the education's going on right now, Mr. Frank Morris.
It is
I
wonderfully,
think
but
Dale Beck did an excellent job. I think Matt Rink did an excellent job in really laying it out this time, actually better than they did when Smucker introduced it. And I'll tell you what, I'll give Smucker a lot of credit, because when he brought charter government down, he did a thorough job of educating people before he put it on before we voted for it.
and
He went down, and this was before 2010, because 2010 is when Butterworth brought it down. And Butterworth did not bring it before the people, and he did not educate anybody. He just put it on the floor for people to vote on it. So the only debate came back was from people from the audience in reference to charter form of government. So let me be very clear. As a chairperson of this committee, I am assuring that we're going to have some education, and I think that's going on right now. And I think it's been going on. And we did a big article in the newspaper not too long ago. But I think today was a first step in moving this forward. I didn't think that it had to be, as soon as you come down here, the same day you have to sign it out. That's not a chairman's role. If that's a chairman's role, you don't need a chairman. All you need to do is just send stuff up to the law department. When things come to the chairman, they're supposed to dissect, they're supposed to research it, and then come back, and that's what committee meetings are all about. So I want to be very clear. That was not the intent, but we're going to slow it down, and I think Edmund did a great job in mapping out why he wanted to bring this forward. And we're not talking about a piece of legislation to do something in your ward. We're talking about changing our structure of government. And I think that's important for the public to know. And if for some reason you don't think so, I think that's a problem. Because we're going to put it on the ballot and they're going to vote on what? Something they don't know. And that's not right.
That's what they vote on right now, things they don't know.
It's not
We
right.
conduct business here 90% of the time, the general public does not know what's going on. A charter government,
right?
as in Kevin's words, is nothing more than rearranging the furniture in the house, correct? If it's my house, I should be able to put the furniture any damn place I want. Now, if we're going to educate our constituents about it, then we have to have a good feeling about it. Edmund did a great job.
For changing our government and putting it before the voters next election. You're saying that there needs to be no education
Sure.
before they can vote on it.
Sure, right. We need to educate them before we change their government. Not our government,
Amen.
their government.
So educate them is important, don't you think?
And I think that we're moving in the right direction. But that's not what you said. You said, quote unquote, when I feel. You said,
As a chairman.
I.
The chairman.
And actually, my question would be for the chairman. We've heard a lot about the educating the public. What are you gauging the public's knowledge on this issue? I mean, I guess what's the benchmark to know that the public has been educated? Because with these meetings,
Hold a town hall. Isn't that educating? Matter of fact, several of you guys have done town halls on traffic cameras, you've done town halls on everything else, but haven't done on charter government.
I guess what I'm saying is that we've heard about the education of the public. It's never been linked to any benchmark. I mean, if we hold these meetings, which I think is fantastic, do we need 10% of the population to hear this presentation? Do we need 50%? And when do we feel as though the public is educated enough? And I would say this also. On the issues that, since I've been on, I've voted on, there's not been one issue yet that I voted on that I have not gotten calls from my constituents having a very strong opinion one way or the other.
Right.
And what I've learned is the public is very smart. They don't need their hand held and through these issues. They read the repository. They come to council meetings. They call us. And I get calls all the time, and I explain to them, this is what we're doing, what's your opinion? And then I take it into consideration. I don't believe charter is going to be the first thing that stumps the public. They're going to have a strong opinion. They're going to do their research on it. They're going to look at other cities, and they're sure as hell going to call us and say, I'm for it or I'm against it. And then it's our job to represent them properly. Then that's what we're here for. If everything was done by the full education of the public, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't have jobs.
So then,
we are here to listen to what they say, to be open enough for them to call us, and then from the information that we get, to then make the decision. And if that's not what we're doing, we're not going to have this job very long. If we're not fully representing the people who have elected us and doing what they want, we're not going to have this job very long. And not only would we get to vote on this, it would then go to them, and then they would have to vote on it again. So I don't think the education is going to be an issue. And knowing when they're educated enough, if that's the holdup, that's a huge thing to kind of nail down.
Member Hop.
I think, I voted the last time the charter came up for a vote, I voted for it, to put it to the voters' hands. I believe it should be in the voters' hands. The finest presentation I've seen so far is Mr. Mack's presentation. I saw Mr. Gotham give us a presentation who's the expert on it. But you broke it down in its very basic, most logical senses. What he's provided here is exactly the only education that can be provided to the citizens. And until the charter is written, when the charter is then written, then they make the choice that that's the total government they want. It's still the right of the voters to make all of these decisions. 15 people will write this charter. None of them can be elected officials.
Mm-hmm.
So the 15 largest vote getters in the city,
Right.
whoever the top 15 are, no educational background required, nothing required, no degrees. The average citizen can take out a petition and get elected to be on the commission to write the charter. They have 1 year to write that, and I hope they do a fine job. Then that entire charter is presented to every voter in the city. Then they make the determination if they want to do it. The education process is quite simple. It's very simple. Read the charter. All council can do is this: put it before the voters. That's what we're elected to do. Put it before them. Let them make the decision as to what they want to do. Dragging your feet and hiding behind, we need to educate people. It's the same as the traffic light cameras. An educational process came forth that target moved every single time I attended a meeting. Every single time that target moved. And it got pulled. Nobody had a chance to vote on it. The last time traffic cameras were debated.
Traffic cameras.
Let's go back. But the education process is what Mr. Mack has put forward. Brilliant. Well done. Concise, to the point. Explains it and lays it out. The advantage is the people will then write that charter. 15 people will write it. The entire population will vote on it. And in 1962, I think we had 110 or 112,000 people in the city. We're probably down to under 80 right now, so let's call it 35,000 people less in the city than we have. I think it's time to redo some of our government and see what really needs to be done to make it streamlined and bring it back and forth and put more power into the hands of the people. I really believe in that. They elect us. We should trust them enough to figure out what kind of government they want. That's important. But you can't tell what the charter is going to be. You can't hide behind education until you see the charter. Because the process is simple. 15 people write it, that's it. The education is this. We will put it out before the voters. 15 people get elected to write it. If the rest of the voters like it, they'll put it forward. We only have one job to do here. Let the voters have it. That's our only decision. We make no other decisions other than that. Other than put it on the ballot and let the voters decide.
Let me be very clear though. When you guys say that I brought traffic cameras before the group, as you guys recall, I had made myself available. I've contacted neighborhood associations to come and present to them. And as some of you guys were there when I went to these neighborhood associations, I went out to the community. I also held a town hall here and educated people on what was going on with those traffic cameras, right?
Yes.
And at the end of the day, I even brought it up here. We had several committee meetings in reference to that, and I did sign that out. But I also held the control of making sure everybody was educated. I'm asking you tonight, what is your plan to educate the community outside of this room?
What's the benchmark that you're basing that on?
It's just educating the community. You can have a town hall.
That's a really subjective.
You can have a town hall.
So you're saying one town hall?
Educate the community.
That's what
If they want to come, they can come. If they don't want to come, they don't have to
But what
come.
I'm asking you is you have to give a more specific definition of what educating the community is. That's the big holdup. We've got. Is it 10 people at a town hall? Or is it 100 people at a town hall?
Come.
So you're saying one town hall, regardless of how many people, and that's what you're saying educating the public is?
You opened it up to the public.
Okay. Now this was open to the public,
This is a committee meeting.
but it was open to the public.
I'm going to ask you in the corner, Portia, what's a charter government?
I don't know. I didn't know. I didn't even know nothing about it until I read the article about you being up here. So,
That's one person.
I mean,
I know Kenny did. Do you know what charter government is?
Absolutely. I'm the former budget director of this city. I've been a long-time proponent. I've worked with Mr. Gottman. I have read a previous edition of the Ohio Municipal League.
All right, so
I
you're
have
pulling it.
worked with the state government, and I will tell you unequivocally, the form of a charter is more efficient. And I think the comments that were made there, if you take everything that we have in Canton as it exists now, put it in the form of a charter of government, you will have a more efficient, effective government.
And would you guys agree, everybody here, would you guys agree that that is not in the hands of anybody to say? That's in the hands of that 15-member charter, right? So you can't just say, I'm going to take this government and put it in, and it's going to be
But
hunky-dory.
you still have the right to reject
Would
it.
you
The
agree?
voters still have the right to reject it.
Oh,
And
yeah,
the voters select us
afterwards.
conceivable. The voters afterward. You can't predict it until it's written.
and there's safety
So what's wrong with
valves.
educating people about what the charter government is?
Educating is what Edmund Mack put forward today. Best scenario I've ever seen yet. It
So-
lays it out
And there's
simply what
safety
charter government is.
valves all amongst. I mean, you have to.
What the charter is different than the charter government.
And the voters have to vote to even consider a charter. Then they vote on who's going to be on that charter.
On the same
and then
ballot.
they vote on the final thing. So there's
In the same
three-
ballot.
Yeah,
the
yes,
same
but
ballot.
there's 3 votes. They get to make 3 votes. They get their say 3 times. Now, I doubt they're going to be wrong 3 times.
You vote to have a charter, and you vote for those 15 members
On the same-
on the same ballot. If I would have signed this out, it would have been on this ballot in November, guess what? Nobody
There's-
would have been educated to even, nobody even got time
The law
to
department
campaign
would,
for
the law
to be on the
department would
commission.
never have been able to put this together in that short a time.
No.
Not even close.
What's interesting about that, we got the 2 to 4 years on like that. It's already on the ballot.
Yeah, but you're talking about
Just like
electing
you said.
15 different people. I mean, they have to have time to gather signatures. I mean, it's
They have to
It's gonna be
write
a
it. and
process.
It
everything else.
is, and that's exactly what I'm saying. If it's the process, then you guys wouldn't be, why are you worried about signing over yesterday? Why not educate the people? You got time. You got
because
time to educate the
we-
people, you got time to put it in process. And if I was the sponsor, I'd be out here saying, I'm gonna have several town hall meetings, kind of like Smuckler did. And I'm gonna have some educational forums and then talk to people about what this charter government means to them.
I educate my constituents on a regular basis. I mean, I don't need a town hall meeting to do that. No matter what comes down, if they have questions, I educate them on that. And this is the charter government is no different. This isn't going to be the first time I've educated on something. I mean, I go to neighborhood meetings to educate them on things. I ask them constantly, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? I mean, that's just a basic framework of what I've done so far on council. And that's just, I thought that's what we do on everything. I didn't think the charter was different.
David Morgan can testify. In Ward 9, we have monthly meetings. I mean, we average 30 to 40 people a month.
That's what ward?
Ward 9.
Ward 9.
We average 30 to 40 constituents to show up, and we talk about issues just like this. So it would be nothing for us to bring in 60 plus people to have these conversations.
Yeah, and I actually fundamentally disagree with the premise that the voters aren't educated on this issue. I mean, I'm in the northern part of the city. I mean, if they live in Ward 8, I'd certainly be happy to talk to you about it, or even if you don't. But I speak with my constituents on a daily basis about this. And they have views one way or another, but they've read one of the 25 articles in the Canton repository discussing this issue. I think this is one of the few issues that's actually been thoroughly documented by our local media. I mean, if you contrast that with the millions upon millions of dollars that we spent on the water reclamation facility. Ma'am, are you aware that we spend millions upon millions of dollars on the water reclamation facility? And I don't mean to make you an example, but
Right.
just to make the point. And I think that to use that as a litmus test, someone's subjective belief as to whether the public is sufficiently educated, I think that's dangerous. Because it's completely contrary to what we've done in the city of Canton. And I think it frankly sets a bad precedent. I think when you have an issue like this, that is frankly very simple, I think, Mr. Hawk, you articulated it fairly well. Do you want to form a 15-member charter commission to draft a charter that would be the governing document for our city or not? It's very similar to the United States Constitution. Done and done. And so I think that, there are consequences for delaying this and not signing the communication because it bogs down our law department. In terms of the legwork that they're going to have to do to get this moving, they've not drafted the legislation yet to get this thing moving because they don't draft it, at least for this specific instance, until you sign off that says, okay, prepare legislation. I think good government is certainly furthered by charter government, but I think good government's also furthered by our process here. I would ask you to sign it out. I mean, and if you want, like John's suggestion, if you'd be satisfied with the town hall meeting, I'd certainly be happy to do it. If anyone would like to call me to discuss this in detail, I'd certainly make myself available. My personal cell phone number to this phone is online because it's an issue that I care a lot about. Because it's not a partisan issue. It's not a socioeconomic issue. It's a good government issue. In my view, if you care about good government, then I think you should care about charter government.
Well, and let me back up one moment. And I would really appreciate you doing that town hall. I think that shows, that you are trying to educate people. Ward 8 is a lot different than Ward 2. Ward 2, the next election, people move. I mean, I have a transient ward, so that's real. People move in and people move out. And those people may not have been here when Bill Smuckler went through his training and education. They may not have bought the repository. Maybe they don't even subscribe to it. But the reality is, if you put it out there, and we can send out Facebook messages out and let people know that this is happening if they want to know what charter government is. And I think that's a fair process. I think every council member can go back to constituency saying they're going to have a town hall to talk about charter government. If you're interested in learning what that is, or if you're interested in being on a charter commission, I believe that should be put out before we send it out there and say, okay, we're going to put it out for the voters, and now you got 15, 20 days in order to decide whether you're going to be one of those 15. I'd like to have somebody from Ward 2 on that charter commission.
I would too.
Somebody from Ward 4, I'm sure, would like to be on that charter commission. And Ward 9, and so on and so forth. We know that the majority of people, and probably like in, 1962? 1962? What was the makeup of that? Was there any other wards in that part? It was heavily dominated from the north.
The actual commission from 1962, you know that as a fact?
I'm asking you.
Oh, I don't know that. I don't know if that data is even.
And I understand that when they did draft it, it was all at large numbers, and they
That's
rejected
true.
it.
That's
And they
true.
rejected it because of that fact.
Well, I think more
And-
broadly, because it made substantial changes to the city of government that people don't necessarily want. And really, the import of that to me is it's comforting that the city voters aren't going to approve a radical charter.
Well, you also got to look at the era, 1962, Canton, Ohio. You get fired from Timken, you go to Hercules and get a job. You get fired from Hercules, you could go out to BMW. There weren't crackheads on the corners, there wasn't people shooting each other up, and if they did, they had last names with vowels on it. It was the mafia, but nevertheless, I mean, it was a different time and era. I mean, there was no need for change. And back in '62, you know, why are you trying to fix something that's not broken? And I think, just like you did a hell of a sales pitch on the cameras. Half the people loved them, half the people hated them.
Right.
But you took the time, you educated them. If that's what you want out of my ward, I'll give it to you. And you already got one email from a guy today, pretty much told you, check your email.
We got some calls from Ward 9 that said they didn't support it either, too, so that's...
Right. So you're going to have your good, you're going to have your bad. The bottom line is, just like anything else, man, let them vote on it.
Well, I think that's right. I think the emails that someone supports it or doesn't support it, I don't think that's dispositive of what we're talking about here. That's how they're cast their vote, and God bless them.
But that means they're already educated. If they're telling you they wouldn't support charter government, that means they're already educated.
They have a reason for not supporting it.
Right. If they tell you that they support charter government, that means they've already understand it.
Well, the lady that said she's not supporting it, she doesn't understand it. And that was a lady who comes up here regularly, Dave's ward.
Edmund laid it out. Government, this is as simple and as basic as I've seen it done. And I sat through Gotherman's presentation. This is a wonder, this is the finest presentation I've seen. It works because it's simple. It tells you what it is. It breaks down the difference. We're not going to pass a government, form of government. We're going to let the people decide what form it will, or what it will be, what the government will be. We're just going to simply get the right to choose what form they want, I guess is what I should say that. You can't intermix what we're doing with the final charter. We're not approving a final charter. We're telling them we're going to vote on to send it to the people, let them decide if they want it. And if this council decides that they don't want to send it to the people, then that's council's prerogative.
And I don't think a voter who didn't understand something would vote for
Would
it.
vote for
They
it.
would think that they're going to vote against it. So,
Pretty much.
Sure, yeah, most people vote no.
And some of us will do exactly as we're directed by our wards. If I get more negatives towards it than positives, when it comes down on the floor, all due respect to both you guys, pro and con, I'm voting with my constituency. I will vote against even putting it on the ballot if the people in Ward 9 adamantly oppose it.
and I voiced my, my concerns about charter government to you, Tom. So, but I think the democratic process needs to
Flow.
It needs to work. Let the people decide.
Well,
Let
then
them
you guys
decide.
are, of course, the Judiciary Committee. Are you guys then in favor of doing a town hall and educating the people properly? And at least sending it out, I'm sure the repository will post something.
Let's go back to John's benchmark requirements. When are you going to end it? When are you going to say they're educated enough?
Just
One
said
town hall meeting?
it. Right, just said
What did I just say?
it. Judiciary Committee put together a town hall meeting.
Okay, one, that's fine.
Where are you going to have it?
Yeah.
I'm not on your committee, but I will do
Right
my...
here at council, would you agree with that, Kevin?
I do town halls constantly over my ward. I'm always up for one more.
And I'll ask you if you could lead that.
Sure. Be my pleasure.
And I will just say one last thing. When the way this came down, right after election, probably during a really bad time, and, with Mary bringing it down and Mary leaving, I thought it was ill-timed. And I will say that 10 times over. She wouldn't have presented this if she won treasurer. And I felt it was highly suspicious.
In Mary's defense, the last time charter came before a vote in the council, in the city council chamber, 4 people voted to send it to the voters. 4. I was one of them. You know what? All 4 of those people were left-handed. Mary Sorelli, Bill Smucker, Dave Doherty, and myself were the only 4 councilmen who voted to send it to the voters. The other 8 said no. It didn't get to the voters. That's council's job, okay? It should come out for a vote again.
But that's not what I said. I said her running for treasurer, and then her losing treasurer, and then putting this on the ballot to get rid of Kim, that was highly suspicious in my mind. And I felt not that that's the reason why I didn't sign it out. I clearly said when I ran with Butterworth, educate the people, educate the people, educate the people. It didn't happen. And I think the same thing needs to occur now, just because he was a Republican.
Didn't even get voted on.
And this is a Democrat. I'm saying I'm going to do it under a Republican or a Democrat. You need to educate the people, and I believe that that's a prerequisite for something this large. And we're going to do that, and then I will publicly say I'll sign it out. But I think that that's a fair statement. To my ward and all the other wards that don't know what the heck charter government is, give them a chance to understand what it is. And that's my point.
And in Mary's defense, I love her to death. Mary will legislate all the way to December 31st when she's cleaning out her mailbox for the last time and heading out that door. Mary may come across as having ulterior motives, but Mary Sorelli is a legislator. Mary comes up with legislation, may not agree with it, may wonder where she came up with it, but God love her, Mary is a true public servant.
Yes, she is.
And I will defend Mary's name till I'm old and gray.
And that's fine. All 12 seats have agendas here. All 12 seats are elected officials and political officials. So I understand that. And I think everybody here is that same sentiment. But I'm saying under this thing, it kind of was highly suspicious in my mind. But anyway, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead. If there's no other comments, I'm going to go ahead and conclude judiciary. And the final analysis is after we do this educational sessions of the community, I will sign it out and put it out for a council vote. And I will, I'll leave it at that.
Pick a date.
I'm leaving it on Edmund to arrange his schedule, and then he'll probably then forward it on to
Edmund,
Cindy.
give you a date right
Get out to
now.
everybody. Okay? I'll conclude judiciary.